Ladies and gentlemen, hello. We are back. I'm sure everyone was waiting with bated breath for us to return. All right, and we got ourselves a doozy of a topic. We got Matt Shapiro, Esquire.
Hello.
No, is that not right? Oh yeah, that's right.
Hello is right. Esquire is
Okay.
right. Matt Shapiro is right. Everything's right so far. We're on the same page.
All right. So, we got Tim CV from various projects. Here we go. All right, everybody. I just watched the recall debate. Any you guys watch the recall debate at all?
I don't know.
We're from California. If anyone else is not, so we got a recall debate that was happening. It was entertaining, that's for sure. I think I'll share my thoughts in a separate stream a little bit later. But yeah.
Well, I'm titillated. I can't wait to see that stream.
Excellent.
Is it a recall of pharmaceuticals or tires or automobiles?
No, of Governor Gavin Newsom.
Gavin Newsom?
Yeah.
Man, I've been in a small dirt hole for several hours, days now. I lose track of time. I need to read the news.
Two of the highest profile of Republicans that are running are like Larry Elder and Caitlyn Jenner, but they didn't show up, so we had four other people. Well. It is what it is. It was what it was.
And this is now.
Yeah.
Live.
And we have a topic that is a hell of a subject this week. What are we talking about, Jared?
We are talking about whether or not college should be free. Should higher education should be free? And just for a little bit of background, there are several countries in this world that have tuition-free college. But the more I learn about it, doesn't mean that they are like free of any cost to students, but they are tuition-free. And so the question is, should the United States kind of follow that and make their institutions free? I guess we could talk about the different scope of it as well. I think that's part of the interpretation. But yeah. So should higher education be free? Well, let's get a little.
This is a really common debate topic, right? Like this is right.
So
for most open tournaments.
Right. We're trying out a new format for our scheduling. The first week of every month, we're going to be focusing on a single case. Anyone who wants to have a sort of a common debate case, things that you typically see in debate rounds, and you want to have a little deeper dive or a discussion on it, first week focus is going to be what we're doing. And we're going to have a theme for each of the weeks and I'll share that when we get to it. But that's what we're doing. Anyone who's watching, any live or recorded, go ahead and throw up a comment about any sort of specific case that you want to do like a 30-minute deep dive on, and we'll discuss it. We totally will.
So when the resolution is the United States federal government should make college free, there's lots of things you need to define. So like Matt, what would you pick out of that as the first things you would define?
Well, higher education, I guess, is a good one to start with. Just to say, Tim, you just said the U.S. federal government. I think, Jared originally didn't say that. So
sure.
I was going to say that, we're in the parametrics. We're going to talk about the beginning of a round like you normally do. Definitions, criteria, trichotomy is something that came to mind. Whether it is U.S. federal government, like Tim just said, or whether it just is blank, higher education should be free. There could be arguments regarding whether it should policy debate, whether it's a value debate or fact debate, things like that. There's grounds for that. Although, Tim, if it said United States federal government, you probably don't need to define that. Maybe you do. What agency?
No, I think that like defining higher education in terms of the scope that you want to talk about is really strict.
Like, are you talking about just college undergrad? Are you talking about brain surgery? Brain surgeon school. Or what are we talking about here?
Right. One of my favorite sort of ways of screwing somebody through definitions was to talk about like Native American tribal colleges is what they're called. So it's like community college on tribal land. And so if there's
really narrow it down.
Yeah.
But
like if there's anything that the federal government, kind of has an obligation to address, it would be, as far as higher education goes, it would probably be that. And so
Or even distinguishing between a 2-year degree and a 4-year. Like a community college could be free, but the state schools and the whatever else you have, private schools, would not be free. You could. There's any level of you want to pick, or whatever case you find, however that works out. You could pick various different places in higher education. You could pick brain surgery school. You could pick that, but the less ground you have to cover, then the easier it is to kind of make a case. Often, I guess that's a general topic.
Yeah.
Although the
I
world
really
needs brain
like if
surgeons,
you've got
so
good knowledge, if you've got like some good solid background knowledge on something that is off the beaten path, right? So tribal college is a great one. If you've got, some stats on that, and that gives you some uniqueness. My favorite direction to go in whenever this topic comes up is trade schools. Be that either a case that addresses trade schools, so just making trade schools free, and then you don't get into all of the disadvantages of like traditional liberal arts $250,000 educations.
Yeah.
Or you make that the counterplan. If you're on the negative side, it'd be like, sweet, these idiots over here are all getting degrees in philosophy. I'm allowed to bag on them. Like, that's a waste of $250,000. Meanwhile, we're coming out the other side like qualified union, welders and like capable
skilled workers.
Skilled workers that are able to do sophisticated jobs that are not likely to be automated away. So there's like lots of interesting ground you can go in that direction. So I love talking about trade schools as either the case or an alternative.
Okay, so we got a question about what the price for university. And listen, I got kids that are going to college right now, so I've been looking this up. I know the in-state tuition for California, let's say, is like about $8,000.
Meaning, if you live in the state of California, it costs, how much did you say?
If you're a resident, so now like you have to achieve it. So it's like for the Cal State, it's like $8,000 a year.
Okay.
And for UC, University of California, like a little bit more elite level, that's like $15,000 a year.
A year.
So
over the course, to multiply that by 4, that's 4 years, right?
Now, if you're on
out of
state, it gets ridiculous.
You're talking north of 45. Starting the last figures that I saw were in the 50s, like mid 50s. Then you talk about private school, and you very quickly can touch the upper 50s, 60s. So for a 4-year degree, you're looking in the ballpark of $250,000. It's just stupid to think about.
And if you want to go to Harvard, you have to buy a building.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, like that's actually a good counter argument. Like the many Ivy League schools, I think Harvard included, made it free. Like just straight up, they have like a $2 billion endowment. So like they don't need the money. Like they have more billionaire alumni than like most countries or something. Like it was a ridiculous stat that I learned at one point. So like they're just fine as far as their endowment and making. So at the Ivy League level, they have the capability to just like wave a magic wand and it goes away. And so any of the arguments around like, quality of education goes down or, teacher pay or all the different things that could come from saying like, as soon as something becomes state funded to get slashed and burned can go away when you have some case study examples of more elite schools that have done it. But granted, it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah. So there's, this all stemmed from like defining higher education, but I do think that you can actually, use the term free.
Yes.
In order to start carving out what you mean by free, because it doesn't mean the exact same thing to every country that does it. Like there's, a good dozen countries that provide free college, what people call free college, but none of their policies are exactly the same. And so basically when you define free, what you're defining is free for who? You know what I mean? And so like, I think that's the moment during definitions in order to start carving out, it's going to be how much does this cost? But it's really what you're defining is who are we talking about is getting free education? Is it everybody?
If anybody too.
Yeah.
I was going to say, be careful. I mean, any serious, like any plan that maybe on the NEG, for instance, if they severely, cut the cost of college, but they didn't cut all costs, that wouldn't be free. So be careful using anything like that on the AF on something like this that actually says the word free. If you go to Webster and you look up free, it's gonna say it doesn't cost you anything. So be careful.
Right. But if you make it zero cost for 5 people, then you've established a a college.
I understand what you're saying.
College, you know what I mean? So it's when you say free, you're like, well, it has to be 100%. I'm like, I can meet that standard, but I want
For
to
that
clarify.
guy.
Yeah. So like when we
college
say,
football players, you know what I'm saying? I think
No, that's not a good case.
Yeah.
Might
Right.
already
So,
be the deal.
but I think that's where it starts. It's kind of like, listen, when we say free, that means that there are a certain population that have access to 100% free. Doesn't mean that every single person that wants to go to college automatically gets in and doesn't have to pay for anything.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and that's like in what you got is precedence, right? To just like, listen, we call all these other countries with free college, we call it free, but there's still restrictions on it, you know what I mean? And so like it's a way to kind of like have little reservations that help, enhance your credibility and not take on too much ground and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right. So as like just a really straightforward case, if you were prepping some students at the novice level in your prep room, what case would you go for?
Community college, straight up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just community colleges are free.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, and I think this was like an Obama proposition. So at the very least, the reason I bring that up is it makes it somebody did some reasonable analysis that it could be done.
You don't need to rebuild the wheel. Reinvent the wheel.
Sure.
There are plans that many plans that have to do with this exact issue, and they're all different. So you can kind of pick one. Jared's talking about one.
So Jared, what advantages come out of that? Like, what good does having a free, and I'm sure you can define for whom, but like what advantage does having a free community college experience afford to people? Like what do we get out of that?
Okay. So I always advocate going for the low hanging fruit, the most obvious arguments. You got to establish that you know what they are and set them out, and just higher wages, bar none. Right. Sure. People you have more earning power when you have a degree, even if it is an AA degree. I'm going to make an argument that it's more likely that you're going to get a bachelor's out of it.
Yeah.
But even if all you get is that AA degree, there is a earning potential that is significantly increased. People that have just certificates and have AA degrees are at least eligible for some promotions that people that don't have it are not. And so that just sets you up for more promotions and then just earning power. So like that's my advantage one. I focus on earning power for individuals. And then you'll probably get a bachelor's because transfer students do really well and you have even more earning power. But, I'd be focusing more on like now you get your bachelor's degree and that opens up a whole lot of other avenues and stuff like that.
In the same vein, I mean, it's essentially the same argument. I was going to label it social mobility, right? Like any sort of concept where, quintessential family who continues to be in the same maybe impoverished state or below the poverty line, whatever you want to call it, the ability to send someone to a college for no cost would greatly increase their ability to have that happen. And then in theory, to correlate with what Jared just said, an increased earning ability through that education alone, compounded with likely a further education from that. Hopefully they can, with that, parlay a job and get access to further education, something like that, or scholarships, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Would you do you think it's defensive of an argument to say like, after this program, bachelor's degree graduates have half the debt, right? Because 2 of the 4 years of debt that they've brought on is cut off. Do you think that that's already like opening up Pandora's box to like debt debates that are not worth fighting?
Like that type of stuff. Sometimes I like keeping that in my back pocket as reputation. You know what I mean? It's like if somebody tries to go for like you don't solve 100% the solvency press. I'm like, well, you know what? You are granting me 50% solvency.
Yeah.
And so, and so that's usually, and I would use that stat that you just cited in order to kind of bolster that argument.
And yeah, I mean, Tim, I see, first of all, like, it's almost like we're not answering the core problem. The problem is why are these kids rushing off to sign their name on a massive amount of debt, which it's not solving if we cut 50%. On the flip side, and by the way, for everyone watching, bear with us. We're arguing both sides right in front of you at the same time. But cutting 50% of, let's just call it, $50,000 to a person who's trying to start their career, who has no money, likely. I mean, that's significant because the systems as it works now, they're just forced to take out a loan because the schools are run like a business essentially. So in so many words, as far as financials go, they're just capitalizing on the student who has to go there for education. So to save 50%, like Jared said, that's quite a bit of solvency to someone who has nothing, in theory. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If you tell Jeff Bezos that his kid is going to save 50% on junior college or whatever, that's kind of a, what does that matter? Everyone's wondering, why does that matter? But there's only one Jeff Bezos. You know what I mean? We're just these normies walking around.
All right, we got someone from England.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for the conversion, Fallen Stars.
Yes.
I can't
appreciate
do quick conversion in my head because I don't follow the exchange rates or anything like that. But oh man, Scotland is a bargain.
Yeah,
man. I'd go to uni in Scotland in a second. I totally would.
Do you think you drink your way through school more than you already did though?
Oh, okay, we're gonna totally get off track, and I don't care, but you could go on like Scotch tours in there. There's this little island, Isla, and I think there's like 4 distilleries on there and everything.
Do you go through all the different regions, which again, that would be very distracting from your studies, but damn, would that be a great time.
All right.
Or you could get your engineering degree there.
Or simultaneously, and
hey.
and just like invent a better still or something like that. For there you go.
You can't get off. You're like, nope. There's only one.
Yeah, there's only one thing to do.
Okay.
So it's a straightforward one, and then I think the only thing that I would say we would want to touch, just because it's regularly overlooked and it's a common disadvantage that comes in, is like, how would we pay for how would the federal government or the state or whoever, how would 2-year educations for tons of people be paid for?
Yeah.
Where does that funding come from?
Yeah. And so,
are you asking, or are we going to the next?
No, I'm straight up asking, because like that's a piece of a common case that should be defined.
Sure.
If whether you're going to give it 2-year or 4-year, wherever, how are you going to pay for it?
We can just increase taxes. I mean, that's what you do, right? You just say, give us more money.
Tim, you've had to have come across questions like this. What's your response to that?
The 2 that I like the best were the Bernie Sanders tax on trades, so stock trades. It was like a 0.001% like tax on stock trades or something. Because the idea that like people that are playing the stock market have that to lose, and it's just would become factored into everything. And it's a very minimal tax that would generate like ludicrous amounts of money. It's insane how much money that would come from. Alternatively, you've got like higher taxes on corporations that make over $1 billion or whatever. Like there's lots of different higher corporate tax pieces as well as individuals. So like taxing the rich is an easy one because it is like the smallest group that is hurt. And it's the group for whom we shed the fewest tears. So those are really common funding mechanisms that I see in cases like that tend to be pretty like wealthy. Like, yeah, that's sure that would happen. And yes, it would raise a ton of money. So yes, we can do that.
Find a classic debate trick or whatever tactic. Go find some obsolete defense program. That's we've talked on this program even about kind of aging old missile programs, and there's new ones coming and they're already funded. So maybe you're like, hey, we're going to cancel the ancient missile program, which is obsolete, and we're going to use that money to go here. Or in debate, you're trying to know your audience. If you're somewhere where the judge, you have a feeling is not going to like certain programs or certain things, hey, go take the money from there and put it in your program. And now they like you because you're for more than one reason. So because it's hard to argue. I mean, we're going to talk neg in a second. Why shouldn't college be free? What's the problem with free college? Well, there's some problems. Or at least there's some issues that some people will have with it. And when we get there, I guess we'll get there. But
yeah, okay. So no, I think we'll come up on it really quick. But as far as funding goes, I think that there's a lesson to be learned on how to respond to funding arguments in general to any case that you go into. Yeah. And I think like the defunct defense spending is a good way. But eventually you get to the point where like, you know what? You explained to me what the worst way we could fund this it would be, and now it's up to you to out impact me. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
And make sure it's a reasonable argument, because I'm going to catch you on ridiculous scenarios that you're bringing up. But if you come up with a reasonable argument that some other program is going to get defunded, then let's have a discussion about what should we prioritize. That's fine. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I think that's how debate should be. You know what I mean? It's like, what are our budget priorities? Because I think education should be pretty damn high in a, as far as a government setting is concerned. And so it's a little bit more vague than the defense spending. I leave it open for that. I'm like, more than likely we're gonna cut from defense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so,
or any program. I mean, when you read the news, you hear stuff on the radio. Like, you'll hear of programs that you're just like, I cannot believe.
Yeah.
Those types of visceral feelings. Hey, there's your answer to your plan of where you're gonna get the funding from, and you're kind of relying that someone else agrees with you. You don't want to go in. If the judge is a war hawk, you don't want to go defund or take money from some cutting edge fighter jet program, because they're like, why would that's just a bad idea. But if they hate certain things, or if the judge, this is where kind of deep knowledge of kind of who you're going to see, where you're going. Generally in the debate community, just going to make a bold statement here. You can kind of go after defense stuff. You can kind of go after anything that typically
depends on where, but yeah.
Yeah. And be strategic with, what would be persuasive in taking money from that thing itself, if that makes sense. You can almost build a part of your case there.
Okay.
So on the negative side.
That's exactly
on the negative side. There's, I think, a couple big ones you can go for. So first off, like, counter plans are abundant, right? Because just arguing against free higher education, you're probably not going to win as many people over. Like, there's probably going to be some good advantages that eke through the cracks if you just argue for the status quo, because the status quo is bad. Like, we can all agree, like, student loan debt is insane, and like access to higher education forces a big wedge into the wealth gap and all kinds of problems when it's not free. So it's good. How do we get there? So you can have either do more, right? But then that becomes plan plus, and the other side can say perm, like, sweet, we'll do more.
You say do more.
As a counter plan, if I said we're going to make not just 2-year, but 4-year free as well, Jared's like, great idea, let's do both. And he's allowed to do that because that's plan plus, right? Yeah. But if I said alternative, like, you can come up with some ways to make them mutually exclusive. I would go with, like, as I was saying at the beginning, the trade school. So we'll use the same funding, or we'll use the same mechanism. Like, we realize it's going to cost about the same, and we're going to make trade school free, right? And then you can have all these advantages of trade school versus 2-year schools, and plot them out. What is the job satisfaction like? What is the earning potential like? What is the impact on cyclical poverty? Like, what are the long-term benefits, right? And those are some things that I would argue pretty straightforward, that trade schools outperform like liberal arts traditional. I mean, even like math, science, and research institutions, like, they outperform higher education institutes as we think of them at tremendous levels. So like Germany, almost 50% of the students in Germany have a technical degree versus a 4-year bachelor's in German, right? Or in English. But that kind of a thing doesn't just mean nothing, right? In the way that, like, the common question is like, what do you do with a liberal arts degree? Or what do you do with a philosophy degree? The vast majority, UCLA did a study that said like 85% of students said that they were going to higher education because it translated to a better job. And that was advantage one, right? So you can very quickly say, we link into this. Students are going because they want to earn more, but the earning potential on most degrees, like even some STEM degrees, the earning potential on most degrees is not as high as that of trade school counterparts. And trade schools tend to be like a third the price. So it's cheaper for the government, and it has more earning potential. So like, you garner all the same many benefits. Plus the jobs are less likely to go away. Like, the majority of higher education jobs end up going into like clerical or middle management kind of retail type positions. And those two things are very quickly being automated away. Like, computers can do clerical work faster than humans can do that. So that's not gonna stay very long. And job satisfaction also tends to be really low too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's another very interesting argument. This kind of comes out of like libertarian think tanks and stuff like that. It's called gatekeeping, where the vast majority of countries with free college have other ways in which they restrict access, and they have incentive. Like, once you create a free college system, there is now incentive for the government that supplies the funding for that to restrict who goes into college, because if there is a bunch of people going in, we can't afford it. And so in order to manage our costs like responsible governors, what we're going to do is have standardized tests that are going to restrict who can get in and who can't. And not only to get in, but in order to move from like year 1 to year 2, you also have to pass these tests. And so there's examples abound that have stuff like this. And so you would say, like, all your advantages about earning potential now goes away if you aren't able to get into college, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, just because it's free doesn't mean you're getting a degree, right? It's like there are other ways to restrict people who get into college, and and there's now incentive to do that.
I was gonna rapid fire through a couple things, and kind of, I think one of them touches right on what you're saying, Jared. First of all, one argument on the neg would just be, increasing taxes. Because if they're increasing taxes, that's bad. Because you don't want to pay your money to the government. You want to keep your money and buy cheeseburgers. Second of all, federalism, or some side of our argument saying
I love federalism.
The federal government shouldn't be, let me be very concise. Maybe some states need a lot of help with their education systems, and some of them don't. So maybe the federal government is more suited to help certain states, but other states
very American argument. I wonder how the guy, like our English audience member, would like that. But
so
like big for 200 years,
whether it be a state or whether it be a private body or something, some association or board who should be in control and not the federal government, that would be a federalism argument. It would be on the neg. Overcrowding and quality of education, I think they kind of tie into each other. If, in theory, every single person went to college tomorrow and the colleges and infrastructures that we have were just full to the brim and no one got any, personal attention as a student and with their teacher, that there's arguments, and I'm sure lots of studies and stuff like that would show how the quality of the education goes down. And in the United States, we pride ourselves, at least we try to pride ourselves on our education system, and diminishing that through this program would be bad. And the last thing is the time suck argument. I don't mean to debate time suck. I mean, if something is free and you go just because you don't know what you want to do and, hey, it's free, so I'll go. Like, that's the type of argument I think, Jared, you were getting to just a second ago, where it's like, just because you go to college doesn't mean you get a better job, doesn't mean you get a degree. It really doesn't mean anything if you don't, like, have this some burning fire in you somehow, some way to, like, kind of pull yourself out of the situation you're in with some focus and direction. So sticking people who have none of that in a college for free, who don't necessarily leave guaranteed with those things, would kind of hurt all the statistics that make college so great, and maybe just would diminish college going to the quality and all that stuff too. So those are quick few. I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, and notice though that the quality of education, how like the story that I was telling about gatekeeping is actually kind of in tension with that. I would think that you'd want to choose one or the other of those and not both, because the story doesn't quite jive. You know what I mean? And so and both of them make rational sense, and that's the sort of frustration about debate, is like, which story makes more sense? You know what I mean? Because like you can't do both of them at the same time. Now, Tim, your trade school counterplan kind of still suffers from the perm problem. Like, I'm like, hey.
Well, I can also fund it way less, right? I could say like it's alternative because it's cheaper, right? So if I were able to compare trade schools to 2-year schools, and trade schools are way cheaper, that I can go plan mine. It's like, nope, we need less funding, and then I can tack an additional disadvantage on top of why whatever your funding is going to be too much, or why it's going to be too costly. So there's some way to make that.
One of the things I like doing is like when someone says, hey, let's make it free, you're like, why don't we just make it really cheap?
Yeah.
Like, what are you like? Yeah. And so that works so well when anyone does anything for free, anything. Mm-hmm. And what you talk, and that's where I think you might want to go with like the education value argument that coming out of Matt, because you can say like, listen, if you make it free, then there's a lot of people come. And so you're actually kind of embracing this gatekeeper mentality, but using cost to do that. Like, that you're saying, and you can make this argument that people should invest in their own education. You know what I mean? It's like that should be, and it's in places. It's still a really common way that people have good higher education systems around the world, right? Like having tuition-free stuff isn't the only way that people do it, and they still seem to have a perfectly good education system with very intelligent people going out, increasing their earning potential, getting all the solutions that you're talking about, while at the same time saving money and making sure that you have people that are invested in it, not wasting a whole bunch of time. You know what I mean? Like, and so you're kind of like playing this middle ground type thing.
If their plan increases the number of students drastically and doesn't increase the infrastructure and teachers, just there's like kind of some room there to kind of like, well, then that's the type of argument I think where the quality kind of, if you're not doing a dang thing other than just putting the same people in, more people in the same rooms, you're not thinking it maybe all the way through. That's where the premise of that argument would come from. And then just because I want to spit out one crazy idea, if we had some like government institution, have you ever heard someone say like, oh, there's not enough engineers right now, there's a shortage of engineers, or there's not enough doctors right now, there's a shortage of doctors. Whoever decides those things, whatever we are short on, they should make like those jobs, those majors free, so that encourages people to go do those things while they're needed. Hopefully that fixes the problem, and there'll be some other problem, and you make.
Oh man, that would be that'd be
really cool, because then you kick out of all of my issues with like we're graduating way too damn many poli-sci majors, right? That like aren't doing other like sweet. All STEM majors are free. It's so long as you major in a STEM area, you get college free. Like, oh, that would actually be cool.
I kind of like that. I kind of like that too. You know what I mean?
There's the crazy idea for the day.
Yeah,
I like that.
It's not that crazy. I kind of like it. And oh man, now you come out with just like STEM advantages.
Yeah. Like it really kind of boots out a lot of the issues, even like the cultural problems that we have with like higher education. We overvalue it and we put too much priority and like too much pressure on kids. Like, well, what if they all came out engineers?
Whatever's needed, because I think it would kind of
or doctors or whatever. Like
I was thinking the opposite then. Like as soon as you said STEM, I'm like, what if we went the other direction? Why don't we say like we need more artists? Oh man,
we do need more artists.
Anyone who majors in art.
The nag on this would be the who is this institution and how are they deciding this? But I know what you mean.
Oh man, I'm down for that. I am down for that. Because I mean, like, I don't know, that already opens up like the more debate space, and it's simultaneously unpredictable, and there's really great arguments. You know what I mean? It's like,
and it's narrow. It can be narrow. Like, well, we need it now. We need it right now.
Oh, so man, that's fun.
Anyways, we're way over, guys. Thank you for staying with us, though.
Yeah. All right. That's our time. It's
been a while.
Everybody. It has been. We were eager to talk about it. And so we got ourselves Matt Shapiro, Tim CV. I'm Jared Kabika Miller. We'll see you next week. Please join us. Leave comments, suggestions for topics. We will definitely cover them. We love doing it. See you later, everyone.